Hi, welcome to this week's Authors Love Readers podcast, where we delve into the stories behind the stories. We're asking authors questions, some of them fun, some of them serious, and from their answers, you're going to learn things you never knew about the people who write the stories you love. My name is Patricia McLinn. I'm your host and designated question asker.
I'm Patricia Rice, and I am an author who loves readers.
Now, let's start the show. Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of Authors Love Readers podcast. My guest this week is Patricia Rice, another person I've known a long time. Also, I've had a run of past presidents of Novelists Inc.
Yeah.
We've gone through a lot together, so we bond, and we know. And I know they will forgive me if I mess up the tech. So Patricia writes a variety of books now, right?
Oh, yeah.
And mystery,
contemporary romance, historical romance, urban fantasy, contemporary romantic mystery.
Isn't that fascinating? You started off, you did spend a long time in historical romance, right?
But I still went back and forth between historical romance, Regency, the small signet Regency romances, and Westerns and English, and I had variety always.
It's a little broader variety now, though. It seems like, that's fascinating. And are you indie, totally indie, or are you hybrid?
I'm totally in. Well, I mean, it depends on how you still define totally, because I still have, the magic books have been reissued by Source Books, and Pocket still has the urban fantasies and that kind of thing. But all the new books, I'm doing indie pub,
and that allows you probably to do that diversity of isn't it fun? Okay.
Freedom. I mean, after 30 plus years, I have freedom. Yes.
That seems to be a thread among those of us who are doing indie. So, okay. Before we get too deeply into the writing, let's get to know you a little better, but I know you fairly well, so we'll let the listeners get to know you. Okay. Do you have a childhood book that really got you into story, that really caught you?
Oh, that would have to be Pride and Prejudice. I mean, all stories. I mean, I read everything before that, but the book that really made me want to write would have been Pride and Prejudice. I read it like in 4th grade. I got it from a Scholastic Scholar library.
Yeah. What about it?
What about, well, I mean, it was a romance. I'd never read a romance. I mean, you go from Pokey Little Pucky to Hardy Boys and, illustrated nursery rhymes. I mean, those aren't, Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew, I suppose, were kind of mystery stories. And, they were interesting. But Pride and Prejudice, I mean, it had fabulous writing. It had humor. It had a romance. It was just everything.
That's terrific. And did you start writing then?
Yeah, I did.
You were writing stories?
Of course, I started writing mysteries, because they were a whole lot easier. But I wrote mysteries in 4th grade.
Now, that's interesting. You consider mysteries easier than romances?
Well, I mean, considering that Pride and Prejudice was my idea of a romance in 4th grade.
Well, and of course, 4th grade romance.
Yeah, right. We don't know a whole lot about it.
Okay.
The love stories. It was a love story. Yeah.
Yeah. And let's kind of stay on this theme and say, do you have a story, from your pre-author days that you didn't like the ending and you thought, in your head at least, whether you actually wrote it down or not, you rewrote the ending?
To someone else's story?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I read, Gone with the Wind early on and thought, well, boy, that really sucked. Rewrote that totally in my head, and I probably figured into the fantasy, but, I think everybody does that.
Do you remember? Well, see, non-writers, I don't think do it.
Really?
I don't think so.
They accepted the ending of Gone with the Wind?
Well, there are a lot of them like that. I can remember as a kid, I watched on TV, I watched the movie, was it called The Swan? It was with Grace Kelly, and she was in love, I think she was in love with a prince, and he ends up being forced into marrying somebody else. And I thought, oh no.
That's not happening. Uh-huh.
No, we got to change that. I don't think I think other people think the way it ends is the way it ends. And
well, it's probably a whole lot easier life. Yeah.
Instead of going around rewriting everybody else's stories that don't quite fit.
And everybody's history and world history. And, I don't like the way that ended. Let's redo it.
Do you remember the movie Summersby? That was one where he ends up dying. And I'm thinking, oh, that is so Hollywood. They think a happy ending is when one of them dies.
Yeah. I went into that when nobody died. Yeah. So, I knew what was going to happen. But then you're free to reimagine it yourself. Absolutely.
And I did.
Yes.
I have a totally different ending for that movie. So.
Well, we'll just have to reproduce it.
Yeah. Like we're going to finance that.
Sure. Any day.
Do you have any strong fears, and do you use them then in books?
Fears. I try not to be fearful because it just leads to paranoia and stagnation, and you just, cover your eyes and never leave the house because, I am very introverted, and just leaving the house is difficult for me. But if I have to pick a fear, it would be poverty, I think. I mean, I grew up having to do, earn my own money to buy my own clothes, that kind of thing. And so I have always been afraid of poverty. So even though I knew I wanted to be a writer, when I went to school, I took the kind of courses that would get me a real job so I wouldn't starve.
And what was that real job?
I became an accountant. I started out wanting to be a journalist, but realized real quick that shy people can't interview people. So I switched out of that real quick.
Boy, that is quite the swing from writing to accounting. What about accounting appealed to you?
Well, it was something I could do. I mean, I had always, I probably do have some kind of a split brain. I mean, even as a kid, when I collected all my little Hardy Boy books and my Nancy Drew books and everything, and people wanted to borrow them, and I learned quickly that they didn't return them. I started charging them for every day they didn't return them. So I added, I had to learn dollars and cents. I mean, I ran my own candy store when I was like 12 or 13 or something like that. And I learned dollars and cents. And then my first job was as a cashier. So, money made sense to me. So accounting made sense.
Go back and tell me how you ran your own candy store.
Well, I mean, when you're 12 or 13, but the only job you can get is to babysit. And, you don't make a whole lot of money at babysitting. The kids in the neighborhood weren't the world's best behaved. So I went to the parks department where they had a stand down there that was empty. Nobody ever used it for anything. I thought, well, that's a good place to sell candy at. And I asked the parks department, and they said, oh, sure, whatever. And I would get on a bus with my little cooler and go down to the candy distributor and fill it up with whatever I could get cheaply that I knew the kids would eat, take the bus back home and sit there in the park and sell my candy.
Do you have any idea what sort of profit margin you had?
Of course not. I had enough to buy a new dress at the end of the week. I was good,
That's amazing. And where were you growing up?
Lexington, Kentucky, most of it, yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's cool. I didn't know that about you.
Well, I'm just a little insane. That's,
Yeah. Well, I knew you had been an accountant, but I didn't know about the candy store. So that's really interesting. Okay, let's go with, from your high school, college days, was there a song that meant a lot to you, that it sort of expressed who you were or spoke about who you were?
I was pretty much into folk songs most of my, school years. I think by high school, I was probably into Simon and Garfunkel, and I really, I probably related to things like I Am a Rock and Sounds of Silence because I was really into protesting the Vietnam War and all that kind of thing. So those were probably the kind of songs I was picking up on then. I wasn't too much into Beatles. Of course, I did do Beach Boys. I was really into Beach Boys.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. And now I think of those two songs from Simon and Garfunkel as strong, but also sad.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
and Beach Boys, I don't think of
the depression, the whole thing. Yeah. High school.
But what about the Beach Boys? How did those fit in?
My best friend is the one who clued me into Beach Boys. And I think that was my way of generating energy, was listening to this upbeat music. In California, I don't know if it was the California theme of Beach Boys that made me want to go to California, or if wanting the sun and the fun of California is what clued me into Beach Boys. I don't know, chicken or egg there.
And how about now? Do you have a song that means a lot to you now?
No, not really. I mean, I can hook into some of the stuff that I hear on the radio, but I just don't listen to the radio much anymore.
I don't as much either, because for one thing, I'm listening to audiobooks most of the time in the car, which is where I would most likely listen to the radio.
I just clue into Pandora, when I play the old favorites. Yeah. I know that there's one out there. Mary Chapin Carpenter has The Bug or something like that. That one, sometimes
yeah.
I enjoy that. Things like that, but.
I that one resonated a lot more for me when I was traditionally published.
Yeah, that may be what it was. Yes.
Yeah. So we're still talking about earlier life. What did you have something that you fretted over and that was really important and seemed like it was a worry, and now you go
Well, you've heard me mention clothes several times. That we were so poor that I had to buy my own clothes. That was something I fretted over because I never looked like everybody else. I mean, I'm never going to look like anybody else, but at the time you don't accept that. So I figured clothes would make me look like everyone else. I couldn't have a poodle skirt, so I made a poodle skirt. And in high school, this is, all my earnings went to I would go downtown and I would look at what was in the stores and say, well, I can't afford that, and just keep an eye on the prices of them and wait until they were on sale, and I'd saved enough money. And I was constantly worrying about, how I dressed. So I dressed, quite stylishly by high school because I'd earned enough money to do so. And it was just exceedingly important to me. And nowadays, I know what looks good on me. I know what colors works for me. The new styles don't do a thing for me. I go online, I pick something out, hit a button, and there I am.
Did you get teased when you were young? Were kids not nice to you?
Well, I think it was more me than anything. Because I'm such an introvert. Yeah, I mean, they're going to try to tease, but I ignored them. I was originally from New York, and I knew how to ignore these, ignoramuses. They're just. But it's inner. I want to look like these people. I want to feel accepted. I don't feel accepted. So what will get me there?
Yeah. Boy, it's tough growing up sometimes, isn't it?
Oh, it is. I don't want to ever go back.
Yeah. I had a great childhood, but there's still those bumps and bruises, and you don't know at that age that you will recover from those bumps and bruises. They seem huge and insurmountable.
Well, that's another reason that I learned to write, was because I wrote in a journal daily. I started out with, those little 5-year diaries where you wrote a paragraph. And by 7th grade, I was writing books of journals of how I feel, or, what I thought, and so on and so forth.
Do you still have those?
There may be one or two, but I think my mother threw everything out with the trash when I married,
Oh, dear.
She liked to clean house.
Did you keep up with journaling?
No, I didn't. Mm-mm.
Yeah, I
tried. Actually, last year I tried. I started in January. I thought I really need, because this is going to be a big year. I'm going to be doing a lot of things this year, and I think I made it 2 weeks. Things started happening.
That was my history my whole life with diaries and journals, and I'd get these as a kid, I'd get these little diary books, and I would never make the end of January. I might pick up with one in July,
Yeah, when you had a bad day and you needed to tell somebody about it.
Oh dear. So, okay, one of my favorite questions that absolutely has no basis for anything, but I'm just curious. You're right-handed?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought you were. So on that hand, is your index finger or your ring finger longer?
Index.
Significantly, huh? How about on your left hand?
Yeah, same thing.
Okay. I don't know what it means. If it means anything.
I thought you were going to give me a meaning for it.
No.
My second toe is longer than my big toe. Does that mean anything?
Oh, that's interesting.
See, there's another one you can ask for no reason at all.
Is there such a thing as foot reading as well as palm reading? I don't know. But it interests me.
Okay. Do other people not have longer index fingers?
It varies.
Huh.
Like mine, the ring finger is longer, and it's significantly longer on my right hand. They're closer to even on my left hand. And the one thing, I've said this on other podcasts, the one thing that I think I remember about palm reading is that your left hand, or it may be your non-dominant hand, but for me it's the left hand, is what you start with, and the right hand is what you make of yourself. So somehow I've made my index finger shorter.
Okay, maybe it made you more balanced. How's that?
Oh, that's a nice take on it. Do you have any sayings that your mother or father or both used to say all the time that you now hear coming out of your mouth?
I really don't remember them saying anything in particular. They would say something like, come hell or high water, or, that kind of thing, but not any particular useful sayings.
No. Okay.
Sorry.
And that may be my strange family. We have a lot of family sayings, but do you have a bad habit word? Most authors do, I think, and we have to go through and search and replace in manuscripts.
Well, it's usually word of the book. Word of the book.
Oh,
Word of the book. There'll be something in one word that just so useful in one sentence that I keep using it for the rest of the book. But if you're going for all the books, then it's directional phrases. It isn't just a word. I use directional phrases in every single solitary sentence.
What do you mean, like directional phrases?
In here, around there, sit down, up there, over there, out the door. Totally unnecessary.
Those
all
are
the time.
Those are tough to go back and remove too, because they're really embedded into the sentence structure. Where some of mine includes just and really, so I can word search for those. But the ones that are woven into the sentence, yikes!
Well, you can cut them right out. Almost every sentence you can just cut them right out if you see them, but you have to see them.
Yes. And it's hard to see it when you wrote it. It just sort of is there a lot of times.
My editors learn quickly. Okay, here's the directional phrase of the month. You will just...
Okay, I have this peculiar desert island. You are allowed to play movies on it. There is the facility to play movies, but you can't leave the desert island, and you can only have 3 movies. Which ones would you pick to watch forevermore?
Well, the problem is I never watch movies. I don't really like movies. They have to be fun. They have to be upbeat. I prefer musicals and dancings, lots of activities like that, because I don't like sex and violence. I just can't watch sex and violence. And how many movies can you think of that don't do sex and violence. So, if I could just have I like theater. I like musical theater. If I could just, transport, theater companies, would that be okay? I mean, yeah.
That's going to get awfully crowded in my desert island. Now I'm going to have to feed them as opposed to movies. You don't have to feed them.
Well, if I suppose, things like Mamma Mia and Wicked, they've all been made into movies, haven't they? So you could probably do those, but I'm going to get bored anyway. I'm just... I'll go swimming in the sea and look for fish before I'll sit there.
You're just going to have to make up your own stories, right?
Yes. Yeah. There you go.
We do, to entertain ourselves.
Could we have equipment to mess with the movies and mix them up?
Oh, that would be interesting.
There you go.
Like a mashup of movies. That would be very interesting. But I think I'd rather write my own story.
Yeah. So would I.
Do that. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. Do you have a motivational or upbeat quote that you like?
I wouldn't remember it if I did, No, nothing other than persevere. I don't know if that counts as a quote.
It's certainly a direction. So I wanted to ask you, Patricia, on behalf of a reader, well, let me say it in her words. Where do your stories come from? I know one author who dreams her stories. Another has a character suddenly taking up residence in her head. So how are your beautiful stories born? Isn't it nice she says they're beautiful?
Well, she doesn't even know them.
Yeah, she does. She knows all our stories, so.
I can't say, like everything else, I do not do one specific thing every single time. Yeah, I've had characters talk in my head. I have seen scenery that has got my brain going and thinking, well, what if, something happened in that particular place? I'm trying to think of how this last one started. Sapphire Nights, I just had this scene in my head that of a woman driving up a mountain in the middle of the night with only a GPS guidance. I have no idea where that scene came from. But, it just played with me until I found a way to use it. Another time, like in Shelter from the Storm, there was a song called Tobacco Road. And that the words of that just drove me all the time. And until I wrote Shelter from the Storm, about a guy who was born in the middle of Tobacco Road, and came back and blew the place up. It's just, inspiration can come from anywhere.
Now, the scene that you mentioned with the woman driving with only the GPS, is that the beginning of the book? Does your inspiration necessarily come from the beginning, or sometimes is it deeper into the book?
It's a mashup. It's a mashup. Because with that story, I had to, since it didn't connect with anything at the time, I just kept developing the scene in my head, and it kept getting bigger and bigger until I realized what it was driving toward was an idea that I had several years back of an isolated California mountain town. And the town was divided between, and, with ideas, you can divide it between anything. You can divide it between conservatives and liberals, or you can divide it between magic and non-magic, or any number of things that hadn't quite gelled in my head. But once I realized she was driving towards something, and that town came into my head, then I started connecting it with my Malcolm and Ives characters.
Mm-hmm.
They were my historical characters, and people keep asking what happens to the descendants. And these are these are psychic characters who have, odd little gifts that, that they develop that most people don't. And once that connected, then I had all the pieces. I just had to put them together in a coherent manner, because talking about them isn't very coherent.
No, but that's really cool. So you had these historicals with some paranormal elements, and then you did contemporary also with paranormal.
These new ones are, yes.
Okay.
The old ones weren't. I used to write straight contemporary romantic mysteries, but these new ones are going to have that that Malcolm psychic element in them.
Cool. And they are the descendants of the characters in the previous series.
Yeah. I mean, you're not going to be, because, this is a few hundred years. You're not going to be able to do a direct line and a family tree and all that kind of thing. But the readers of the historical series should be able to say, okay, this looks like the guy, from cool. such and such, and this one has the ability of from such and such, so that you can see, the connection.
It's interesting. You're talking about taking that you'd had an idea, and it's like we sort of put them in the storeroom, in our heads, and then it's an idea, but it doesn't have other things to connect with it yet. And then when you get a new one, at least I do, then I kind of take it out and I look at that and think, well, what's back in the storeroom, and what else could connect? And somebody else was saying it takes usually at least 3 to really get going on a whole story. So the question is for that writer. So the question is then, from the time you have that idea, and even, when you've paired it with another idea and that really starts things rolling, how then do you go about making that into a book?
Starts with research. It always starts with research. Because me being historical romance, that's my background. I would research, I would have an idea, and I think, well, I don't know anything about this period or this era or this setting, so I need to look at it, and I need to dig it up and investigate it inside out. With the contemporaries, it isn't, I'd have to go to the California area that I'm thinking about and see what's there and look into the geology and the what have you and that kind of thing. But I dig in there. And then, of course, because I'm doing the descendants from a previous book that I wrote 20 years ago, I need to research those.
Your own books, right.
My own book and dig all that material out to see what they were doing. And all the time I'm doing this, things are clicking. I'm making notes, and thinking, oh, this is really cool, and because crystals are involved in this current one. And I know people think crystals have powers, and I love looking at crystals, and I collect rocks on the beach, and I have an affinity for them, but I don't know anything about them. So I had to start researching crystals and rocks and the geology of California, which had absolutely nothing to do with things by the time I got done, but I needed that basis.
Yes.
And once you're things, you have ideas. I can't explain it. You've got the characters, and then you have the research, and you have this piece of a story conflict, and they just start falling in place.
So what is your favorite part of the process then?
Finishing the book? Well, except I never know when I'm finished.
How can you not know when you're finished?
I have no idea. I'll write the draft, but the whole time I'm writing the draft, I'm rewriting the draft. And I'll get to a point where I say, well, I can't rewrite this anymore because I've memorized every single solitary line, and I'll send it to a beta reader. And, a month later, they'll send it back, and I'll think, oh, cool. Look at this. I could do this and I could do that. And then I go back and I rewrite the whole thing again. And if I kept sending it to editors, I would keep rewriting. It never ends. And then even after it's formatted and out there online, if I went back and read it, I would try to change it again.
Yeah, me too.
Yes.
And it's something when I teach writing, one of the things I tell people is you've got to let them go, which is what deadlines are for me. And because I do believe that we keep becoming better and better writers. And the trouble is that you're going through this manuscript, and so you're better at the end than you were at the beginning, and you could just cycle over and over and over.
You know the story better. You're not necessarily a better writer.
Oh, I think you are too. I think
in one book.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it may be incremental, but yes, I do think, and I think for beginning writers, it's particularly so.
Yeah.
That, maybe we're, the two lines that approach each other but never meet, we're getting down farther into that, that area where people who are starting earlier are pretty wide apart from where they start and where they end a book.
Yes.
But yeah.
All I have to do is think of my early books. I mean, people publish these books. I don't even want them to see the face of day again. And a lot of the ones, the backlists that I have reissued, I have gone through, I haven't rewritten the story. The story was always there, but the craft, I mean, it's constant.
It's so interesting to me that some of mine stand up pretty well and others don't. And it doesn't seem to be chronologically. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That's really interesting. So when you started publishing, how do you feel that you have changed? How did publishing, getting published, change you as a writer?
Well, I started over 30 years ago, back in the days of the typewriter, and I was working and I had kids. And so at the time, writing was just something I did in my spare time. And getting published, I wasn't paid enough to change that a whole lot. I think I could buy, some living room furniture with that first check. It was not worth, because I was a CPA. And the writing was more or less a hobby. So I would just do whatever I did to sell that first book. I needed a particular story. I would write it out in longhand, type it up, send it in. And it didn't change until I started making money. And once you start making money and you start realizing, well, if I do things differently, then I can sell more books. It wasn't a process of understanding that I was selling books. I was just selling to an editor at first. But as you become published, you become more aware of sales. And, sales become important, and you need to narrow down your focus to reach a broader audience. And then I'm thinking, okay, Westerns aren't selling as well now. Regency romances are selling well. I love Regency romances. Can I write I've never been to England. I've been writing what I know. But that kind of thing happens as you sell your books.
Did you feel, though, that so you also enjoyed writing the Westerns, the historical Westerns. Did you miss writing those as you became more market conscious? And you need to be more market conscious, because if you're not in traditional publishing, they will stop publishing you.
Yeah.
But did you feel that it made you set aside things that you enjoyed writing?
I don't think so, not at that time, because at that time they would buy bubble gum off the sidewalk, if you put it in correct. So I could write something like Denim and Lace, which was essentially a Regency set in California Sierra Madres. I could, and they would buy it, and it did extremely well. I think that one got a RITA nomination. But at the same time, I could go to England and research real Regencies. And so I was doing everything I loved. Now, as time went on and the market got tighter and tighter and tighter, and no, I couldn't do Westerns. I had to do Regencies. And you learned people wanted you to only write one kind of book. That got bad because I can't write just one kind of book.
Well, and I was thinking very clearly from the time, you started doing independent, you've done a diversity of genres, and it's almost like it was being pent up. It was sort of the sense I got.
Yeah.
Well, is that accurate?
Yeah. The Family Genius series, I wrote the first book of that way back when I was writing both contemporary and historical romances, one for Penguin and one for Random House. And I love those stories. I mean, they're some of the greatest stories I ever wrote, but I had that need to write something besides romance. And the Family Genius series I thought was fabulous. I mean, I knew it didn't have a market niche. I knew it just didn't fit anywhere, but I sent it to my agent anyway. And she says, yeah, that's nice, honey. Come back and and so it sat in my desk drawer for a long, long time. But I had a brainstorming group back then. I had plotted the entire series. I mean, it's vaguely political at the time, and it probably still applies now, but not anywhere near as closely as it did at the time. And I had the whole thing plotted, and I wanted to write it. So that was the first thing I did. Well, no, that was the second thing I did. I pulled a couple of other old historical romances out of the drawers when I first went indie.
Mm-hmm.
And I edited them and put them out there because they had already been bought, and approved, and then the publisher crashed and sent them back to me. So I, made thousands of dollars off them already. So I figured, oh heck, I can just put these out here there. But then I went to the Family Genius ones, and from there I just kept going. I went anywhere I wanted to go.
Do you have any more books in your drawer that you think might? Do you have any, first of all, that you think will never see the light of day? And then do you have any more that you think, with some reworking, these could be brought out, or you want to bring them out?
I don't have any I want to bring out. I mean, I've got 2 books, my very first 2 published books, that I will not even go back and read again. And there were, of course, books before that. If I don't want to read those 2, I'm not going to read the ones earlier than that. And I do have an urban fantasy that I started on that was a very interesting series, and I had plotted all kinds of things. And I couldn't even interest my agent in that one. And it was pretty far out there. So I set that one aside, and I don't know that I want to go back to it. And then I've got I wrote 2 books for Pocket that was an urban fantasy that I saw as a big series with diverse heroines. And Pocket was let's not go there. So I wrote the 3rd book, Indie, and I just stopped it right there because, I mean, it was urban fantasy. That was not where my market was. I enjoyed writing them, but I equally enjoy writing these mystery romances, and I enjoy writing the mysteries, and they're a whole lot easier to do. So for now, no, I'm happy where I am.
Now, doing all this, doing the diverse kinds of books, do you find that, I'm guessing that what leads you to you say you've been writing the mysteries and you decide you want to write a romance. Is that based on what story is yakking at you in your head? And does what you're writing affect your mood?
What is yakking in my head is what I'm going to write. I don't sit down and think, oh, I'm going to write a romance today. I just don't. I'm what Joe Beverly used to call someone who flies into the mist. So yeah, I'll have my characters, I'll have my conflict, I'll have my setting, and I sit down and I write. And
so you don't know which genre it's going to be in when you start a story?
This is why I have a paranormal contemporary romance mystery right now. You see how this works?
That's great.
I don't know that it's great. It's not great for building market.
I often start in books in the middle.
Oh, that's neat.
I don't start books. I write out a sequence, and it's usually some scene that is somewhere in the middle. This is the most frequent. It's not 100% by any chance, but it's usually conflict between the 2 main characters. And what I don't know their names yet. I don't know anything else about them usually, but they're having this dispute, and sometimes it's dialogue, sometimes it's not as much dialogue, but that core usually tells me which genre it's going to be.
I wish I could do that. I'm going to have to try practicing that. No. The middle of the book, I usually just blow things up. It's so much simpler.
If in doubt, kill another character, right?
Yes.
So when you finish a book, this is a question from a reader. And I think it's a wonderful question because it also reveals something about the reader. When you finish a book, do you miss the characters and do you think about them? And I think pretty clearly this reader does. And then the attached question is, does that then ever lead you to another book?
The Malcolm and Ives characters carried me through a dozen historical romances because, I mean, they kept popping up. Okay, what is this one going to do? What is this one's gift now? And they would just, they carried themselves, right? I mean, they just wrote their own books right on through, for a dozen titles. And of course, they still nagged at me. I mean, I was just that I wasn't ready to write another historical romance, but I wanted to play with some of the ideas that developed while writing those other characters. So yeah, and I did the same thing when Rebellious Sons was straight historical romance, and I knew I was going to be writing about younger sons. So when I was writing the first book, characters just kind of popped up, and yeah, you want to know about them.
Yes, I totally understand. Do you think that writers look at the world differently from other people?
That's probably too generic. I think people with empathy look at the world differently from people who don't have empathy. I think people with imagination are capable of looking beyond a problem better than people who are looking to add 1 + 1 + 1. And writers tend to be both. Yeah. So, yeah, that's why I can see both sides of this question. As an accountant, I could look at the world from the economic, spectrum, and see how it applies to a business. So it's hard for me to say that I look at the world different from Joe Blow. I don't know how Joe Blow is looking at the world. I think writers probably have the ability to see, as you talked about with writers rewriting the ends of books, we're capable of rewriting other, we don't accept the situation as is. We're capable of rewriting the situation.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. Another reader question. What is your favorite place to write and why? Does it have an inspirational view?
Don't we all wish? I can't sit still. I can't sit in one place. I keep moving around, but I do appreciate flowers. And if there's no flowers, a good fire or some good music. My basic tasks I do at my desk where I'm sitting right now, and I can look outside and I can see blooming clivia and I can't even, the plants names have gone out of my head because that's not the mindset I'm in right now. Yeah. Bougainvillea and so forth. Ooh. But I'm looking out on my patio and my backyard. So yeah, it's inspirational. But I shouldn't be looking at them when I'm writing.
True. So do you have a writing routine? It sounds like you write on your laptop and move around, but do you have a routine?
No routine. If I'm stuck, my go-to will be to pick up pen and paper and huddle up in a corner and maybe listen to music, or if it's sunny out, I'll go sit in my sunny corner with my pen and paper, and the motion of my hand helps. But if I can't go outside, and that happens, music will sometimes get my focus back. But other than that, I'll sit anywhere, anytime, any place, just whatever. I used to sit outside, watch the kids on their big wheels while I wrote by hand,
So you said when you're stuck, do your books change a lot from conception to publication? possibly because you get stuck in places and have to figure your way out, but other reasons too. I'm just curious if, or from the time you sort of cement the idea, is that what's going to come out?
I don't have any such thing as cement in my head. It's all that mist, remember? Yeah. No, I just sit and I write. And when I'm done, if the blurbs that my editors used to write, I wish I had written the book that the blurb was about. But no, I mean, the summary, back when I wrote summaries, my books never were the same as the summaries. They had to be rewritten after I wrote the book.
Okay. So you do change a lot. Me too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, ideas happen. You can't help how ideas happening.
Another reader asks, when the cover image doesn't match the character description, and she says it's a pet peeve of hers, how does it feel for the author?
Back in the print-only days, that was a problem because the editor didn't have time to read the book, and she doesn't remember, and she's got this cover description, that might have described something that I'd written, 6 months before, and the artist they commissioned artists at the time. And you can't get an artist to change the painting. So yeah, sometimes the colors would come out wrong, or they would be a horse's ass, where there should be something else. It was just, and I would feel strongly about it, but there was nothing they could do. So I had to learn to get over it. I mean, because, no matter how much I complained, the artist wasn't going to change. But when things became computerized, we could all get together and say, hey, this doesn't work. We can do this. And that was like magic. Yeah. And of course, these days I can work directly with the cover artists, and we would, they don't paint anymore. They use photographs, of course. And we would find the right photographs and mix and match and get things just, close enough. Now, because I don't, I mean, how do you do a cover for a contemporary romance, mystery, paranormal? So I'm not totally happy with Sapphire Nights, but I think it says what it needs to say.
Since you've been doing indie and doing, having covers made to your specifications, have you updated any of your covers? Have you gone different directions with them?
Oh yeah, I just did some of my early Random House contemporary romances, the ones with heavy duty mysteries in them. I have just put them into a series with new covers, new titles, the whole, shabab, because at the time what they wanted to market was contemporary romance. Because there's no such category as contemporary romantic mystery. And they had the pretty little covers on them and the romantic covers, and some of them had some really nifty motorcycle riders and things like that on them. But I didn't ever feel as if they reflected the book. Flowers might be me to a certain extent, but flowers do not reflect a mystery. So yeah, I've changed up a lot of things.
And another reader asks, as long as we're in this kind of vein, how much does it bother you to find editing errors after your book goes live?
Well, I would not read the print books when they went live because I couldn't change anything. That way I didn't know about them, right? And if somebody told me about them, I would just grit my teeth and say, I can't do anything about it. It was proofread by 3 different people and it happens. Nowadays, I torture these books to get as many errors out of them as possible, and it still happens. But nowadays, you just go in and you push a button and change it. So it's just a matter of getting a list of things that need to be fixed, and then I fix them. So, it bothers me, yeah, because I don't want errors, but, I'm not going to wear myself thin worrying over them.
I wish worrying over them would wear me thin. Because I do fret about them, but it doesn't, I hate them.
I can't handle stress. That's one of my neuroses and I mean, it's physical and it's inherited. I can't handle stress. So I work
at not to stress. That good for you. Wow. That is important to do, and very admirable that you have done that. So we'll switch from those sort of questions and ask if you've had if you have any stories you can share with us about interactions with readers, good, funny, unstressful interactions with readers.
Just going out to meet readers is stressful until I get to talking to them. But I don't know. I mean, I don't go out much anymore. When I did go out, they would send me to places like, those major food conventions where they say, oh, we need some authors here signing books, because they would sell books in food stores too, way back then. I'd end up sitting next to Spider-Man, that kind of and if Spider-Man needed a potty break and the people were all standing in line and were in a hurry to get to the next booth, well, I'd sign as Spider-Man. But, the readers are just so sweet that it's hard for me to even pick out. I've had readers send me tote bags where I have no idea what magic they use to put my cover on the bag. And they're beautifully sewn bags, sturdy things that I'm still using today. And one of them did me a 3D painting with frame and everything in my mailbox with my name on it and the same colors as they just do fabulous things.
That's terrific. I love that. Going back to Spider-Man, I have to tell you, at one time I was a blue light special at a Kmart.
Well, that's pretty cool. I probably was too, but my memory isn't good enough to remember because Kmart was the only store in town.
Yeah. And those blue light specials were a big deal. Yeah. So what do you read for fun? With all the genres, I'm really interested in this because of all the genres you write in.
I take spells, right now I'm reading I think it called a mystery, but it's a lovely little book that has ghosts in it and English cottages in it. And it's just very pleasant and unstressful. And I'm just enjoying the heck out of it. But then I'll switch to a romance, pure Regency romance, or I'll switch to one that has action adventure in it. Or I read a lot of cozy mysteries, but I read it to find authors I like, and so I don't always finish the books. That I read like I write. Everything
all over.
Yeah.
How do you discover books that you're going to try to see and new authors to see if you're a good reader author fit?
My best place for finding books is with my posse, the Word Wenches. They're a bunch of historical romance authors, and we talk about books behind the scenes. And once a month, we do a blog on the books we've read recently. They're so in sync with what I enjoy that I usually end up, we'll laugh. And then you say, we'll describe a book we're reading and give a URL and let everybody come back. Oh, we all just bought it.
Yes.
So that's the best place. That's where I get the best books that I've read. A lot of times I get several of these newsletters like BookBub and things like that just to see what other people are doing, and if I click with a particular author, then I can go out and buy the rest of the series, that kind of thing. But, it's hit and miss a whole lot because I can't go to the bookstore anymore and pick books out.
Because you're not close to a bookstore now, or?
There's no bookstore, and the things that are in the bookstore are either books I've already read because it's all backlist, or bestsellers that I don't read, It's just finding that mass market, group that I used to fit, roam through and find things that work for me. It's not there anymore.
Yeah. So are you reading mostly digitally?
Oh, yeah. It's almost all ebooks unless I happen to find a print book that's cheaper. Yeah, but the print books have gone to such ridiculous prices that, it's hard to do that.
And I should say that we have previously had Anne Gracie on from Word Wenches. So we talked a little bit about Word Wenches then, but we will have that URL in the show notes.
Good.
Of all your books, of all the genres, What book would you recommend somebody new to you start with?
That's going to depend on what genre they like reading.
But say they're a reader like you, where they have eclectic tastes. They like lots of different things.
Well, I would say Wicked Wickerly is probably a gateway drug.
That's what we want. We want the gateway drug. And Wickerly is W-Y, isn't it?
Yeah,
Wicked,
it is.
And then W-Y-C-K-E-R-L-E-Y.
Yeah.
Now tell us which of the genres that is.
That's just straight historical romance with humor.
Oh, great. Okay. And what era?
Regency. That's the beginning of the Rebellious Sons series.
And among all your books with all the genres, do you have one that you think even your most loyal readers might have overlooked a little bit? I always think of these as my orphan books. I have a couple.
God, I tried thinking about that and couldn't figure out what I would call an orphan book anymore, because I've pretty much serialized everything, and they all, I know back when they were single titles, things like All a Woman Wants. I mean, it did very well, but it was just hanging out there on its own, because it wasn't a part of a series, and it came in between the various magic books that I was writing, and because the editor was still stuck in the era thinking, well, we just want single title romance. And it's a great book, but it just doesn't connect to anything. Or something like Nobody's Angel, which was one of my contemporary romances, but it was heavy duty mystery suspense type of thing. And it wasn't part of a series, and it just it had an awful cover. When it came out in print, it was an awful cover. So, I've repackaged it and put it into the Tales of Love and Mystery series so people can find it these days. So it's hard to say, that there's an orphan book out there anymore.
Okay, but you've given readers a couple titles, so even if they have read your other books and they haven't read those, they can try those out.
Okay.
So have I missed asking you something that you would like to answer?
I think I've already talked about the Sapphire Nights books, the Crystal Magic series, so that would be the only other thing.
And is that your most recent release?
Yeah, that's the one that's coming out at the end of March as we speak. I don't know when this is coming. The podcast
will probably be past the end of March.
So it should be
out. What's that title?
The Crystal Magic is the series, and Sapphire Nights is the first book. Topaz Dreams will be the one that comes out after that.
Great. Okay. And where can readers find out more about you and your book?
I have a website, patriciarice.com. I probably have an author page on Amazon. Word Wenches is where I blog the most. I blog on my website occasionally. I'm on Facebook, Twitter. I haven't learned Instagram yet. I don't do pictures well. I do words.
I have my dog all over Instagram.
There you go. I would have to do flowers. I'm not sure what that would get me.
Oh, that would be fun. Actually, I don't know whether it existed before I did it, but there's a hashtag author gardens.
Oh, nice.
So now we have my probably very favorite, where we have these either ors, rapid fire. And I'm going to say cat or dog?
Dog.
Hot air balloon or train trip? Hot
air balloon.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah.
Both of them would be cool. I like both of them. Heels or slippers?
Heels. No. Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking the type of heels. Slippers. I'm in slippers all day long.
Appetizer or dessert?
Dessert. I have a sweet tooth. I try not to, but yeah, dessert.
White chocolate or dark chocolate?
It would have to be really good white chocolate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Ice cream or cake?
Cake. I love cake.
Interesting. Okay. Binge watch or make the watching last as long as possible?
I have never binged watched in my life.
Okay.
Does that answer that?
That answers that. Paper plates or best china?
That's going to depend. We do paper plates daily, china for Thanksgiving.
House decorating or gardening?
Gardening.
Okay. What's your favorite plant?
Oh, I can't. That'd be like asking my favorite child.
What's your favorite yellow plant for blooming in the shade?
Clivia.
Oh,
I have one right out my door right now.
Yeah, but I think it needs too much warmth for me. I was asking for my garden.
Oh, okay. For your garden, what you could do, there's a Xberry azaleas would be great.
Oh, okay. I'll look at that. Although I have very not acidic base. You don't say base.
Okay, well then you're going to go with daffodils and forsythias and pretties like that.
Oops, sorry guys, we got on a sidetrack. Hiking boots or cowboy boots?
Well, they're both comfortable if you get the right size, but I probably use the hiking boots more.
Okay. Pickup or sports car?
Sports car.
Cruise or trekking vacation?
Trekking.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Nail polish or bare nails?
Bare. A garden. I mean, come on.
Take the best first or save the best for last?
I am now at the point where I'm living in the moment. Give me the dessert now.
That's great. Thank you so much for spending this time with us, Patricia, and really enjoyed it. And for the listeners, hope you'll come back and join us next week when we talk to another author and get to know them and find out about the stories behind their stories.
Thank you, Pat. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great week of fun reading, everybody. That's the show for this week. Hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for joining Authors Love Readers podcast. Remember, you can always find out more about our guest authors in the show notes, and you can find out more about me at www.patriciamclinn.com. You can also send in questions to be asked of future authors at podcast@authorslovereaders.com. Until next week, wishing you lots of happy reading. Bye. If you like this podcast, we hope you'll consider becoming a supporter through our Patreon page. With a small monthly donation as little as $1 a month, you can help with the hosting and editing costs that make the show possible. To thank our Patreon supporters, we offer them special bonuses. Find out more at authorslovereaders.com or at patreon.com/authorslovereaders. That's PATREON. We also hope you'll subscribe to this podcast and leave us a review wherever you listen to us. Both of those help more folks find the podcast. Of course, the very best way for other folks to find the podcast is for you to tell them about it. So we sure hope you will.